Aloha. I'm Pastor Travis Sager from the Honolulu Central Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about an amazing revitalization that has happened here in Honolulu. Today I want to introduce you to what I'm going to call the four horsemen of church revitalization. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the only thing to consider. There are so many factors that go into revitalizing and changing the DNA of a church that you really can't narrow it down to just four. But we are going to give you four elements that we have been very intentional about over the years and things we've been very cognizant of, especially through the pandemic of the last few years. The first horseman of the four horsemen, if we're going to revitalize our churches, is vision. Now, we all know that we need to have a vision for our church, but sometimes the process of obtaining that vision and figuring out what it is, it can be a very lengthy and sometimes frustrating task. And so I'm going to tell you what we did. We sat down. It took us several different meetings with our elders, with our board, with our pastoral and church staff. And we finally, as we looked at the programs that we already had in place, and as we looked at the personnel that we already had, we determined that we were going to minister to families with children. Now, who doesn't want to minister to families with children? Who doesn't want to have their church filled with young people? We all do. Sometimes we make that our goal, but we don't always have the elements in place to make it happen. And so as we looked around our church, we decided that's what we wanted to do. And that was the vision that we cast, was creating a ministry for these families with children. And that's the key I want us to focus in on here, is that our vision needs to be ministry oriented as opposed to being results oriented. Too many times we make the end result our vision, when in reality we should be making our ministry the vision. And so we decided that our vision was going to be reaching out to young families that have children. We also considered other things. There's other ministries that you could use. Community services. I've had churches that have used community services as their main vision. I've had churches that have used health ministries as their main vision. But the idea is that when you cast your vision, make sure that it is ministry oriented and not results oriented. So the first horseman of the four is vision. The second horseman is creating positive experiences. Once we decided that ministering to families with children was going to be our vision, and that's what we were going to set out to do, we then said, what do we need to do? What experiences do we need to create within our church? What changes do we need to make? What ministries do we need to add? What things do we need to perhaps let slide away in order to be this kind of church that we were wanting to become and had envisioned ourselves becoming? And so here's some things that we did just to give you an idea of the transformation and the revitalization process. We already had a Pathfinder and Adventurer club in our church, but we put a lot more effort into staffing. Our youth young adult pastor went out and recruited the young adults to help out with adventurers. And it really gave a shot in the arm to our adventurer program, because no longer was it parents only that were working, but now we added a whole new element of these young, energetic young adults who wanted to come in and do something for our kids. Our Pathfinder Club, we had some new people that came in to help. You know, there's always an inflow and outgo to your youth ministries, but we decided that was one area we needed to spend some time with. Another one was, especially during the pandemic, when there wasn't much else going on here on the island of Hawaii, we started a drive-in movie series. So every Tuesday night, there'd be a drive-in movie, and it gave families, it gave kids places to go to be able to run off a little steam and have a little fun. We also took a look at the services that we already do. we looked at our worship service and we said, if this is something we're going to achieve, if we are going to be a church that reaches families with children, what does our worship service need to look like? And we realized at some point it was way too long. And so we narrowed down our service and we work really hard to get out around noon each Sabbath. And I can tell you it has made a tremendous difference on the comfort level of families as they come to church. They know that their kids are not going to get too restless and too rowdy as the service kind of fits into their regular daily routine. A lot of families have lunch around noon, and so that's how the kids are programmed, and so that's how we made our church services. We kind of oriented them around our young families. Something else that we did that was kind of neat, we started doing a word search. So we'll sit down every Sabbath, we'll go through key words that are going to come up during our service, whether it's for the scripture reading, maybe it's something that's going to come up during children's story or the sermon, and we make a word search. The kids come to the back of the church, they pick up the word search, they find all those words, and after church is over, they come to the back and there's a prize box, and they get to choose a little prize out of the prize box. And again, you might wonder, does that really work? Well, we have people that have joined our church since we started doing that said, we got up on Sabbath morning and we said, where do we want to go to church? And our kids all started jumping up and down saying, we want to go to the church that has the prizes. So that's, again, part of creating a positive experience. Another thing we do is we create these random events. We have candy jars, or we just finished this week or a couple weeks ago, we just finished what we call our keiki kala jar, which is our money jar. Every Sabbath during the month of January, the kids could guess what was in the money jar, how much money was there. And this past Sabbath, on February the 5th, we announced the winners and gave the kids their prizes for the ones that guessed the closest. We started this year our first annual Back to School Bash, where a couple weeks before school starts, all the families come together. We have a lot of different events like moonwalk. We have a dunk tank, cookout, and we collect school supplies. We give out all kinds of school supplies. We've been doing that for many years. This was by far our biggest year of collecting and giving out school supplies for our young people. So there's a lot of things that we do here to create positive experiences, to kind of give that second horseman some life. So again, the first horseman of our four is creating a vision, having a vision. The second is creating positive experiences. The third thing that we do, and we talk about this at every single board meeting, the third horseman of the four is customer service. Now, that's a term that sometimes makes us a little nervous in the world of church. He's like, oh, customer service. I'm not quite sure I like that term. I don't want to think of my church members as customers. Well, it's an internal thing. We don't talk about customer service from the pulpit, but understand that it's a mentality that says we are servants. We are here to serve. If I don't genuinely like you, if I don't genuinely want you to be in church, or if it's just a series of boxes that I'm checking when I start to talk to you person to person, it's not going to work. I have to genuinely want you to be in this church. Now, let me give you a couple illustrations of customer service that hopefully will help you understand what this means. If you ever get a gift at Christmas time, and I remember a close friend of mine got a gift, and it did not come with a receipt, and it wasn't something that they were going to use. They took it back to the store that it was originally purchased from. And when they went to the customer service desk, they basically said, look, our rules are this. You have to have a receipt or we're not going to return your gift. Even though, we are the place that sells this particular brand, we're not going to give you a refund. Well, the person wasn't out anything. They hadn't paid anything for the item, and yet they walked out of that store with a negative experience, even though they hadn't lost anything. The question we have is, what kind of customer experience are we creating when people come into our churches? Do they feel that they're being genuinely cared for? Do they feel that we really want them there? Or do we sometimes come across as we're just checking some boxes to make sure you feel welcome? Now, I'm going to tell you a second story. One of our groups that meets here together with us is an Ilocano Philippine group. And one day I walked in and their services were over. They were starting their potluck, and there was a lady sitting there, and she had a cake sitting in front of her, and she had a big smile on her face. The cake was all red, all around the borders. The flowers on the cake were red. The writing on the cake was red. And the writing said, "Happy 78th birthday, Jane." And she was just so thrilled that they were recognizing her birthday. And she said, "Pastor, make sure you come back in a little bit, and I want you to have a piece of cake." So it was not long after this, a couple of people from the group came looking for me and said, "Hey, we need a broom." I said, "Well, what happened?" They said, "Well, we've had an accident we need to clean up." So I went and got them some cleaning supplies, took them back to the room with them, and come to find out what had happened was when they had gone to pick up the cake, it just had a cardboard bottom, and the whole thing had folded over, and the cake had fallen frosting first onto the ground. Jane was sitting there in tears. She wasn't sad so much because she had lost her cake as because she wasn't able to share it with other people. That week, I went down to Sam's Club, and unbeknownst to Jane, I ordered her a brand new cake that said, "Happy 78th birthday, Jane," with a red border, red flowers, red writing. She will never forget the fact that her church and her friends cared for her. This is what I mean by customer service. Are we paying attention to the lives of people? Are we genuinely interested in what's happening in the lives of people? When we invest and when we care about people in a genuine way, and not just in a, "Hey, I need to make sure I care for this person" kind of way, we will find that church becomes an exciting place to be. So the third horseman is customer service. So back as review, we have vision, we have creating positive experiences, we have customer service, and the fourth of our four horsemen is access or availability. As a leader, do you allow people to have access to you? Are you available to people? One of the greatest things that set Jesus apart from the religious leaders of his time was that he was accessible. People knew that he was available, that he would come to them. Think about just in two chapters, in John chapter 3 and 4, you have Nicodemus, a leader of the people, one of the Sanhedrin, who comes to Jesus by night, and Jesus meets with him and talks with him. And then the very next chapter, Jesus and his disciples are on the way up to Galilee, and they go through Samaria and they meet a woman at a well. And Jesus again, despite all social norms, allows access to himself. Jesus was available, and Jesus allowed access to himself. And that's what we should have as a church, whether we're pastors, elders, deacons, deaconesses. We should be accessible. We should be available to people. They should know that if they come to us, they're going to find a listening ear. They're going to find a caring individual. So now that I've kind of been through the process, the four horsemen, and a little bit of what we have done here to revitalize the Honolulu Central Church, again, it's vision is our first horse. Creating positive experiences around that vision is our second horse. Having a customer service or a caring program in your church. And finally, being available, being accessible. Now, what's happened here? Why the big deal? What has resulted? Now we'll get to results. Main focus is ministry. What's happened over the last 2.5, 3 years is that our church has just about doubled in size. We've gone from an attendance in the mid 100s to an attendance around 300. This is in the midst of the pandemic that we've been facing. The other thing that's happened is, without putting any emphasis on it at all, we don't get up front and talk about money. But what's amazing, what's happened is, our giving has gone up so much that we actually have no issues now meeting our local church budget. And we are going to be undertaking a $1.4 million building project that at this moment in time is more than paid for through the monies that come in to our church. We haven't had to spend a lot of time worrying about money and how we're going to raise it. We have instead spent our time focusing on our vision, on creating positive experiences around that vision, on paying caring attention to those that are part of our church and those that are part of our community that we have the opportunity to reach, and by being available and being accessible to those that come and those that we have an opportunity that sometimes we go to them to be available to them. I hope this is helpful, and I wish you a good day. I bid you aloha from the beautiful state of Hawaii.